The past she thought she'd buried came crashing back the night she was wheeled into the ER, bleeding and unconscious. And the surgeon who walked in to save her life? He wasn't just any doctor. He was the man who once shattered her heart, the man she vowed never to forgive. But with her life, and the life of her unborn child, dangling by a thread, what he did next would stun everyone and change everything in ways no one could have predicted. At 3:15 a.m., an announcement cracked through the sterile halls of St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago. Dr. Matthew Cole, obstetrics, room 3, emergency. Daniel stopped mid-step, surgical gloves still clinging to his hands from the cesarean he'd just finished. In 15 years as an obstetrician, he'd heard his name called in plenty of urgent cases. But this time, there was something different, something in the nurse's voice that carried raw, unmistakable urgency. "Doctor, it's critical." Nurse Hannah Brooks rushed out, breathless. 36 weeks, severe hemorrhaging, blood pressure crashing fast. She may not hold on. Daniel stripped off the gloves and headed for the scrub sink, adrenaline roaring through his veins. He'd faced dozens of life-or-death deliveries, mothers on the brink, chaos barely held together, but nothing could have braced him for what was coming. "What's her name?" he snapped, his voice tight as his hands trembled slightly under the running water. "Rachel Hayes, 28. She came in unconscious about 20 minutes ago," Jessica replied, skimming the chart. The name hit Daniel like a gut punch. For a moment, his hand stopped cold. Rachel Hayes? No, it couldn't be. Not after 2 years of silence. Not after the way he'd left her behind. Chicago was a city of millions. Surely, it was another Rachel Hayes. But even as he tried to steady his breathing, his gut knew the truth and twisted in denial. "Doctor, are you all right?" Jessica's voice cut through his hesitation. "I'm fine," he lied. "Let's go." They sprinted down the hallway, fluorescent lights flickering overhead like a strobe. In Daniel's mind, the same frantic thought spun in circles. It's not her. It can't be her. It has to be someone else. But the second the doors to room 3 swung open, his world collapsed. It was her. Emily. His Emily. She lay on the table, pale as snow, her face slack in unconsciousness, her body trembling beneath the harsh glow of the surgical lights. The rise of her belly revealed the late stages of pregnancy, but the blood spilling across the sheets told another story, dark red, spreading fast, screaming danger. "My God," Daniel breathed, frozen in the doorway. "Doctor." Claire Donovan, the anesthesiologist, snapped him back to reality. "Her pressure's 80/40 and dropping. We don't move now, we lose both." Daniel forced himself forward, legs heavy, heart pounding harder than it ever had in an oar. Once, he had loved this woman. He'd promised her forever, promised her a family. And then he'd broken every vow. 2 years ago, when Emily whispered the words "I'm pregnant," he hadn't been ready. Fear, selfishness, the crushing weight of responsibility, whatever the excuse, he'd left her. Walked out with nothing but a cold letter on the kitchen table, and Sophie Grant, a nurse who had stroked his ego and fed his need to escape. And now, fate, cruel and twisted, had delivered her back into his hands, bleeding, fighting for her life and the life of the child he once rejected. "How long has she been like this?" Daniel asked, forcing his voice into the calm, detached tone of a professional. "Contractions started around 6, Jessica replied quickly, flipping through the chart. "Bleeding escalated in the last hour. Her husband brought her in." Her husband. The word cut deeper than a scalpel. Emily was married now. She'd built a life without him. "What's his name?" Daniel asked before he could stop himself. "Ethan Hayes. He's in the waiting room." "He's frantic," Jessica added. "Michael." Of course. Emily had moved on. She'd found someone solid, dependable, someone who hadn't abandoned her when she needed him most. Daniel swallowed hard, chest tightening as the monitor beside her flickered with an unsteady rhythm. "Focus. She's not yours anymore. She belongs to another man. But right now, she's your patient. You cannot fail her. Prep for an emergency C-section," he ordered sharply. "Jessica, bring in 2 more assistants. Lauren, confirm blood type." "Oh, negative," Lauren replied. The team sprang into action, urgency hanging in the air like static. Daniel tugged on his gown, but Jessica caught the tremor in his hands. "Doctor, do you know her?" she asked softly. His head snapped up. "Why do you ask?" "Because you went white as a sheet when you saw her. And your hands, they're shaking." Daniel's gaze dropped to his fingers. In all his years, through the toughest surgeries, the messiest complications, they had never once betrayed him. But here, standing over the woman he had left behind, they trembled like leaves in a storm. "I'm fine," he lied again. "Let's begin." The scalpel touched her skin, and instinct took the wheel. His movements turned precise, mechanical, honed by years of repetition. But inside, His mind was chaos, regret colliding with guilt in a storm he couldn't silence. Placental abruption, he diagnosed immediately. A dangerous tear. It explained the river of blood. The baby? Jessica pressed, voice urgent. We'll see. Daniel answered, cutting deeper, reaching the uterus. And then it happened. The sound everyone in that room had been waiting for split the air, sharp, raw, defiant. A newborn's cry. A girl. Tiny. Rosie. Alive. Daniel lifted her for just a moment, and his chest swelled with a rush of emotions he didn't dare name. In an instant, memories flooded back. Emily once confessing she dreamed of a daughter. A little girl she could raise with the same strength and love her own mother had given her. She's perfect, Jessica exclaimed, her relief breaking into a smile. Apgar score, 9. Daniel handed the baby off to the pediatrician, his gaze lingering on the tiny tuft of brown hair, so much like Emily's. But there was no time to hold on to the moment. She's crashing again, Lauren shouted. Pressure's dropping, fast. More blood now. Daniel barked, sweat dripping down his temples as his hands worked without pause. Clamp. Stitch. Transfuse. Every move was a battle against the tide pulling her away. Minutes blurred into hours. Time lost all meaning. And then, finally, the bleeding slowed. The monitor steadied. Numbers climbed. 70/50. Jessica breathed, relief flooding her voice. Emily had survived. Daniel let out a long, shaky exhale, his hands finally steady as he closed the last sutures. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to really see her, not as a patient, not as a body on a table, but as the woman he had once loved and destroyed. Her lashes fluttered. Slowly, hazily, her eyes opened. She scanned the room, unfocused at first, then froze when she saw him. Her lips trembled. Her voice, a breath of air. Daniel. Yes, he whispered back, his own voice breaking. It's me. You're safe now. Her eyes filled, not with joy, but with something tangled. Shock, confusion, maybe even fear. And her first words weren't about him. My baby, she rasped. She's alive, Daniel said quickly. She's perfect. Just in the NICU for observation. Emily closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then she whispered something that pierced him deeper than any blade. You saved us. Before he could respond, the door burst open. A man stormed inside, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, panic etched into every line of his face. He went straight to Emily's side, gripping her hand with desperate tenderness. Emily, thank God, he choked out. How are you? How's the baby? I'm fine, she whispered, weak but steady. She's fine too. Daniel stepped back, his chest tightening as he watched. Ethan Hayes, her husband, pressed his lips to her forehead with love so raw, so unshakably real, it made Daniel ache. Tears streamed down Michael's face as he looked up at Daniel. Thank you, doctor. You saved my family. Your family. The words struck harder than any accusation, sharper than any wound he had ever inflicted on himself. The hours after surgery slid past in a blur for Daniel. On the surface, it was routine. He had done what he always did, save lives. But this time, nothing about it felt routine. He wasn't walking away from the operating room with just another medical victory. He was walking away carrying the full weight of a past he had never truly left behind. Emily was alive. The baby was alive. By every measure, it was a success. Yet when her eyes had opened for that fleeting moment and landed on his, the silence between them had been louder than any alarm or monitor. He had abandoned her once. And now, fate had forced him back into her world in the cruelest, most impossible way, her survival resting squarely in his hands. Daniel lingered outside the recovery room window, his chest tightening as he watched. Emily lay still, pale but breathing, drifting in the haze of anesthesia and exhaustion. Beside her, Ethan Hayes sat like a sentinel, fingers wrapped around hers with unshakable devotion. On a small bassinet nearby, the baby girl slept peacefully, her tiny fist tucked beneath her chin. The sight should have been pure beauty, life renewed, hope born. But for Daniel, it was devastating. That could have been his life. That could have been his family. The thought burned as much as the guilt he had carried for 2 long years. Behind him, footsteps tapped softly on the linoleum. Nurse Jessica appeared, holding a clipboard close to her chest. She hesitated before speaking, as if gauging his state. Doctor, you've been standing here nearly an hour, she said gently. Are you sure you're all right? Daniel forced a smile that never reached his eyes. I'm fine. But he wasn't. Not when every detail in that room, the hand Michael held, the breath Emily drew, the baby's small, steady rise and fall, reminded him of everything he had thrown away. 2 hours later, word came that Emily was stirring. Daniel's name was called, and for a brief moment, he considered not answering. But his legs carried him forward, back through those heavy doors, back into the space he had both dreaded and longed for. He entered cautiously, careful not to disturb the quiet scene that had settled over the room. Michael remained close, brushing strands of hair from Emily's forehead with tenderness that twisted inside Daniel like a knife. Emily's eyelids fluttered, her gaze struggling to focus as reality drifted back. When she finally saw Daniel, her body tensed ever so slightly. It wasn't anger, not exactly. But the shock in her eyes was unmistakable, like seeing a ghost you thought you'd buried. Her lips parted, voice still hoarse. Why are you here? Daniel swallowed, his throat tight. I was on call tonight. When you came in, I was the surgeon assigned. Emily's breath caught, and she turned her face slightly away. For a moment, Daniel thought she might tell him to leave. Instead, she whispered, the baby? She's healthy. Daniel answered quickly, the words spilling out. Strong lungs. APGAR score of 9. They're just keeping her in the NICU for observation, but she's perfect. Emily closed her eyes, relief softening her expression. A tear slipped down her cheek. Michael leaned in closer, pressing his forehead to hers. She's going to be just like you, he said softly. Strong. Beautiful. A fighter. Daniel stepped back instinctively, giving them space. Watching the raw, honest love between them was almost unbearable. It was the life Emily deserved, the life he had denied her. Still, despite everything, a question gnawed at him. Did she believe he had saved her just as a doctor? Or did she know, deep down, that it was something more? Because as much as he tried to shove the thought away, Daniel knew the truth. He hadn't fought for Emily like that because she was just another patient. He had fought because, on some level, he still loved her. And maybe, against his better judgment, he always would. Outside the recovery room, Daniel stood alone once more, staring through the glass as night melted toward dawn. He had saved her life. He had delivered her daughter. He had done everything right this time. And yet, he had never felt so utterly wrong. Emily belonged to another man now. The child belonged to another man. And Daniel, for all his skill, was just the doctor who had done his job. But deep inside, a storm raged, regret for what he had lost, longing for what he could never have back, and something else he dared not name. Now let me ask you this. Do you think Daniel saved Emily simply because it was his duty as a doctor? Or because part of him still loved her and couldn't bear to lose her again? If you were Emily, waking up to find the man who once abandoned you standing at your bedside, would you feel gratitude or betrayal? And what about Michael, the husband who never left her side? Could you imagine thanking another man for saving your family, knowing he was the same one who once shattered your wife's heart? What do you think? If this were your story, whose side would you be on? Daniel's, Emily's, or Michael's? Emily's voice was fragile, but her words sliced straight through him. Why are you here? Daniel swallowed hard. I'm your doctor. I operated. You're alive because you did your job. She cut in, her tone sharper now, eyes shining with unshed tears. She paused, her gaze piercing him. But that doesn't explain why you stayed. Michael glanced between them, his brows pulling tight with confusion. You two know each other? Silence pressed heavy. Daniel felt the air shift, thick and suffocating. His chest ached with the weight of the answer he wanted to give, the truth he had buried for 2 long years. But this wasn't the moment. Emily broke the tension with a whisper, her voice steady but thin. We crossed paths before. Years ago. It doesn't matter now. Michael frowned, clearly puzzled, but chose not to press. Instead, he squeezed her hand and murmured, what matters is you're safe. And our daughter is safe. Our daughter. The words drove into Daniel like a blade. He had no claim, no right. And yet, the memory haunted him. Emily once confessing how she dreamed of a baby girl, a little one she would raise with the same fierce love her mother had shown her. Now that dream was real, but not with him. When Michael stepped out to call their families, Daniel stayed behind, checking vitals, charting details. Emily's eyes followed him, silent but heavy with questions. At last, her voice trembled. You saved me tonight. But tell me, Daniel, why? Why would the man who walked away without looking back fight so hard to keep me alive now? His throat tightened. He wanted to tell her everything. That not a single day had passed without regret. That she had lived in his thoughts every night. That all his success meant nothing without her. But the words never came. Instead, he forced the safer answer. Because it was the right thing to do. Her expression shifted, sorrow and anger clouding her eyes. It should have been the right thing 2 years ago. The words struck harder than any blow. Daniel nodded slowly, accepting it, because she was right. He deserved every ounce of her pain. Later that morning, Michael returned, balancing 2 cups of coffee and a smile that couldn't be dimmed. His face lit with pure joy as he cradled his newborn daughter for the first time, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. Daniel stood in the corner, a silent shadow, watching. It was a moment no father could ever forget. Raw, sacred, unforgettable. But it wasn't his. Dr. Harris, Michael said, turning toward him with warmth in his voice and gratitude thick in his throat. You didn't just save Emily tonight. You saved our family. I'll never be able to repay you. The words were meant as thanks. But to Daniel, they landed like chains, binding him to a truth he could never escape. Daniel gave a stiff, polite nod. I was just doing my duty, he said, but inside something coiled tight and painful. Michael's gratitude felt real. His love for Emily was obvious. He was everything Daniel had failed to be. Over the next few days, Daniel kept visiting Emily under the official cover of post-op checks. Each time he entered the room, the air between them grew thicker. Her recovery moved along steadily, but her silence toward him spoke louder than any words. She answered his clinical questions, but held back everything else. Michael filled the gaps with stories, little anecdotes about their life together, plans for weekends, hopes for their daughter. Daniel listened to every line as if each one hammered another nail into the coffin of what might have been. Emily had moved on. She had found someone steady, someone who hadn't walked away. And yet, when Michael wasn't looking, the way Emily's gaze flicked to him told a different story. One of old wounds, memories not quite buried, pain that still whispered beneath the surface. One afternoon, after Michael left to fetch lunch, Daniel found himself alone with Emily again. She sat up in bed, cradling the baby, the room hushed, and the city's noise muffled by the thick hospital glass. The infant slept against her chest like a small, steady promise. She's beautiful, Daniel said softly. Emily's expression eased as she looked down at the child. Her name is Lily, she said. The name struck him like lightning. Years earlier, Emily had told him, in a voice full of daydreams, that if she ever had a daughter, she wanted to name her Lily. He remembered the warmth in her eyes when she said it. Now that dream had come true, but not with him. You remembered, he murmured before he could stop himself. Emily glanced up, surprised, then quickly returned her attention to the baby. Michael liked the name, too, she answered. That's what matters. Daniel felt his chest burn. The name wasn't coincidence. It was a small, stubborn remnant of their past, a piece she hadn't fully let go of, no matter how steady she tried to appear. Emily, he whispered, voice cracking. I have to say this, even if you don't want to hear it. Walking away from you was the worst mistake of my life. I told myself I wasn't ready. I thought running would fix the fear. I was cowardly, selfish. All I did was destroy us. Not a day has passed that I haven't regretted it. Her eyes filled, but her jaw tightened like steel. Stop, Daniel. Don't do this. You don't get to walk back into my life and tear open wounds I've spent 2 years stitching closed, Emily said, her voice breaking but firm. I have a husband now. I have a family. I know, Daniel replied, desperate, leaning into her words. I see that. I respect that. But you asked me why I fought so hard to save you. It's because I couldn't lose you twice. Not like that. Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks as she clutched Lily tighter, her knuckles white against the blanket. His confession cut deep, dragging at a piece of her heart she had convinced herself was buried for good. The door opened. Michael walked in with sandwiches in hand, a warm smile on his face. Instantly, the tension in the room dissolved. But for a heartbeat, the glance Daniel and Emily shared told a story neither of them dared to speak. Something unresolved still lingered between them, hot and undeniable. That night, alone in his apartment, Daniel couldn't sleep. Every image of Emily cradling Lily replayed in his mind like a reel on loop. He had saved her life. He had delivered her child. But her heart, her future, belonged to another man. And still, deep inside, he couldn't shake the sense that fate wasn't finished with them, that the story wasn't over. He was right, because within days, a truth would surface, a truth none of them were prepared to face, a truth that could shatter the life Emily and Michael had built and force Daniel to confront the consequences of the past he thought was buried forever. The days after Emily's surgery blurred by for most. But for Daniel, every second stretched like a lifetime. He told himself over and over that he would walk away quietly, that this time he wouldn't interfere. But fate had other plans. It came one morning when Nurse Jessica approached him, a file clutched tight in her hands, her face unusually serious. Doctor, we need to talk. It's about the baby. Daniel frowned and opened the file. At first, everything looked routine. But then his eyes froze on a single line. The blood type. Lily's was AB negative. Emily's was O positive. Michael's, according to the hospital record, was also O positive. A genetic impossibility. Daniel's breath caught. His chest tightened. He flipped the page again, hoping he was wrong. But the truth screamed from the paper. AB negative. The same rare blood type he had. His knees went weak as he sank into a chair, the realization crashing down on him like a wave. Lily wasn't just Emily's daughter. She was his. The daughter he had once been too afraid to want now lived in the world, breathing, perfect, real. The daughter Emily had dreamed of. The daughter he hadn't even known was already his. That evening, Daniel stood outside Emily and Michael's hospital room, the truth burning in his chest. Through the glass, he saw Michael cradling Lily, his face glowing with unshakable joy. Emily watched them both, her smile tender, the picture of a family complete. Daniel's heart splintered. If he revealed the truth, he risked shattering everything. If he stayed silent, he condemned himself to a lifetime of watching from the sidelines, his daughter growing up believing another man was her father. He stepped into the room quietly. Emily's eyes met his, and for the first time, she seemed to know. There was fear in her gaze, yes, but also recognition. "We need to talk," Daniel whispered. Michael looked up. "About what?" Daniel hesitated. His soul tugged in 3 directions: duty, love, and the fragile peace that hung in the air. Finally, he forced a smile. "About follow-up care," he said smoothly. "Emily, your recovery looks excellent. You'll be able to go home soon." Emily's shoulders dropped, relief washing over her. But with it came something else, something like guilt. She understood. He had chosen silence. For now, Daniel checked the monitors, scribbled notes on her chart. In Michael's arms, Lily stirred, her tiny eyelids fluttering open. For the briefest moment, her gaze found his. And Daniel felt it. Something undeniable. She knew him, not as her doctor, not as a stranger, but as something more. Later, as Emily walked him to the door, her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "You know, don't you?" Daniel's throat constricted. "Yes, but she's safe. She's loved. That's what matters." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "Please don't take this away from us." He shook his head gently. "I won't, but I'll always be here, Emily. For you. For her. Whatever you need." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you." That night, Daniel left the hospital with a strange mix of heartbreak and peace. He had lost Emily once, and now he had lost her again. But in that loss, something priceless had been given back to him. A reason to live better, a reason to become a man worthy of the daughter he now knew was his. And sometimes, love doesn't mean claiming what's yours. Sometimes it means protecting what's already beautiful, even if it has to be done from the shadows. What about you? Do you think Daniel made the right choice by keeping the truth to himself? Do you believe secrets like this can really stay hidden forever? If this story moved you, comment 100 down below and tell us which country you're watching from. And don't forget to share this video, so more people can feel the same emotions with you.